Hello, I'm Ed Fuquay, young adult librarian extraordinaire here at Woonsocket Harris Public Library.
And I'm Michaela, human being here at Woonsocket Harris Public Library.
Here to do another book talking.
Yes.
I still want to start with a quote.
Go ahead.
Down these mean streets a man must go who is not himself mean, who is neither tarnished nor afraid. The detective of this kind of story must be such a man. He is the hero. He is everything. When you hear words like that, you know that you're dealing with Raymond Chandler.
Yes. Well, until we started discussing Raymond Chandler and his, I will say his probably most well-known work, The Big Sleep.
Yes.
Well, all the other detectives we had seen, I was, especially talking about the hard-boiled genre.
Yeah.
I was comparing to, all of those parodies and spoofs.
Exactly,
and
yeah.
I was like, oh, yeah, no, that's kind of like this, or that's kind of, that's like Dashiell Hammett, or, and then Chandler. Then reading Chandler, I was like, nope, all of it's Raymond Chandler.
All of it's Raymond Chandler.
Yeah.
If Dashiell Hammett invented the hard-boiled detective, in some ways Chandler perfected it.
Oh, absolutely. Even reading other novels from so many different writers, I feel like this is the masterclass. Like everyone who wrote detectives after this.
I fell in love with this book when I was a kid. I love his use of language.
Oh, absolutely. The descriptions.
His descriptions of things are amazing. And because I loved it so much, I kind of ignored a lot of the book's flaws.
Oh yeah, well we'll delve in. We'll delve in. But first, let's talk a little bit about the man behind the book.
Yes, Chandler's life was not as tragic and grim as Dashiell Hammett.
No, definitely not. I feel
it
like
had its bright spots.
It had its bright spots. I feel like a lot of the issues in his life, which came much later on, were mostly self-inflicted, if anything.
Yeah.
He's not so much a victim of circumstance. He put himself within those circumstances.
Yeah, he grew up in England, had British citizenship. He went to British public schools. In fact, he went to the same school that P.G. Wodehouse went to.
He had an amazing education. He was born to an American father and an Irish mother, and after the father was out of the picture, she took him back to England. And he had a fabulous education there. Yeah,
he definitely has a different way of approaching words and language than any other American writer because of that British influence.
Oh, yeah.
Alan Moore once said that everyone thinks that British comic book writers are so much better than Americans. It's simply that we steal from different sources.
Yeah, they have a broader pool to kind of steal from.
Exactly. So he brought something very unique to the detective form. So he fought in World War I, came down with Spanish flu. He eventually
sensing a trend with
writers
coming down with Spanish flu.
He pretty much had to, apparently. After the war, he married the stepmother of one of his friends.
Yes.
After which his family cut him off.
Sissy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He married a woman, or fell in love with a woman 18 years his senior.
Yeah, I know. They said on the marriage certificate she was 53 at the time of their wedding, and she wrote down 43 because she was very vain about her age. Well, she was a model. She was a model for years, and she had been married twice before, and this was her third marriage, and his mother hated her.
His mother hated her with a passion.
Hated her. Would not give a blessing to the marriage. So they had to wait until after she died, and they married a month after she died.
After his mother died. Yeah. He went on to have several odd jobs. He eventually became like a vice president for the Dabney Oil Company.
Oh yeah, I know. I have a fun quote about the Dabney Oil Company. Well, he climbed his way up through the Dabney Oil Syndicate, and he became. I believe held the position of vice president. And I have a quote here about why he was let go. Granted, it was the Great Depression. A lot of companies had to let people go, but this is great. Having begun in 1922 as a bookkeeper and auditor, Chandler was, by 1931, a highly paid vice president of the Dabney Oil Syndicate. But his alcoholism, absenteeism, promiscuity with female employees, and his threatened suicides contributed to his dismissal a year later.
Little things like that. Yeah.
Oh my God, what was it like working for an oil syndicate in the 20s and 30s?
It was apparently very bad. Dabney Oil had a reputation of being incredibly corrupt.
Yeah.
He was living in Los Angeles, and Los Angeles corruption is a special breed from like anywhere else in the country.
Well, when he moved there, I know that when he was he felt like a very deep connection to the U.S., having been at least, born here, and some of his formative years spent here. He felt a pull to come back to the U.S. in the 20s, and on the boat, I guess he was planning to settle in the East Coast.
Yeah.
And on the boat ride here, he met some people, and they said, "No, you need to come to California. You need to go to California. It's the newest, it's LA especially is like the newest city in the world, and everything
up and
there
coming,
is new."
yeah.
And he loved it there. He really like fell in love with the magic of it. And then towards the end of his life, like living there, I guess one of the quotes from him was, "Los Angeles, a city with all of the appeal of a paper cut." And you see that in his novels. I feel like, especially with The Big Sleep, his use of description of the different places in LA, it feels like it is as much a character as anyone else.
The city itself is a character, yeah. Other writers have done the same thing with their settings. Like I said, LA is unique.
Oh, yeah.
It's a big, sprawling place that doesn't, there's no like downtown LA.
Yeah.
There is no center of LA. It just sort of sprawls out across the desert.
And it's all the artists, and like it's a very weird mix of like the super duper wealthy and the super duper strange, and they kind of come into this like meeting where everyone is this very eccentric sort of
California
character.
was the home of artists and eccentrics and the very rich and the very poor. It was the promised land still in this time period, as everybody went during the Great Depression.
Listen, it's as far west as you can go. You can't go any
can't
farther
go
west.
Any further, yeah.
It's the last frontier.
When I was in Los Angeles, I remember it as being just like baked in the sun. It is reclaimed from the desert, famously, with water that they stole from Northern California, good old Mulholland. But oddly enough, in The Big Sleep, it never stops raining in Los Angeles.
Yeah, I know. There's so much. I was like, is this part of climate change that it's not raining as much anymore in LA?
Well, they have the big concrete rivers to drain away the rainwater, because there's no place of water to go because it's completely
flat. Plateau,
exactly. So.
Oh my goodness. But yeah, he had so he married this woman who was much older than him, and I guess when she eventually passed away, his wife, he fell into deep depression and loneliness, but he wouldn't inter her ashes. He just kept her ashes in the basement of like the mausoleum where she was supposed to be interred, which I just thought was weird.
Yeah, obsessive, alcoholic, suicidal. Yeah,
he was very much.
He was a perfect pulp writer.
He was a perfect pulp writer.
He went to work for the pulps
after he lost his job for the myriad of reasons.
Where else can you go? He was one of the many writers who wrote for Black Mask magazine that I talked about last time.
He's one of the Black Mask boys.
Yep. He actually started imitating the style of Earl Stanley Gardner, who today is only remembered for creating Perry Mason.
Yep.
He actually created several different series characters aside from Perry Mason, but Perry Mason was the one that took off, of course.
Yeah.
He never looked back after that. But he was considered the consummate pulp writer in those days. He would churn out a different story every month with a different series character.
Yeah.
So he copied Earl Stanley Gardner and sold several stories. And he eventually hit it big with Philip Marlow, his hard-boiled private eye.
Oh my God, Philip Marlow.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, in the movie version, Humphrey Bogart, I think he plays him so perfect.
Played him and Sam Spade, so he really had the lock on hard-boiled detectives for quite a while
understood the role.
The cynical, hard-edged hero who's a romantic at heart was something Bogart absolutely specialized in.
Oh, absolutely. But now we're talking about the movie. So let's talk about
The
Big Sleep. So much happens in this book.
It is quite a book. If you sit down and do a chart, there's not that many murders.
No, there aren't that many murders. And one of the murders, I got to speak with your wife a little bit about this. Her main gripe with it is there is a murder that happens and you never find out who killed this person. And
there's a famous story about that. It involves the movie. I can jump ahead to the movie for just a split second.
Just because I need to know. Yes. I need to know this fun fact.
Lai Brackett and William Faulkner were working on the screenplay for the film, and they couldn't figure out the exact sequence of events in the movie, and so they wound up sending him a famous telegram asking, Mr. Chandler, we can't figure out who killed this guy, and Chandler responded, I have no idea.
Even the writer doesn't know.
Yeah, so in the film, it's also never solved.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Yep. Nope.
Yeah.
It's always good. Nice and open-ended. Just leave the audience reeling. It's great.
Yeah, the story involves our hero is a private eye.
Yeah.
He is more of an honest, upright private eye than, say, Sam Spade is. He used to work for the DA. He still has a badge from when he worked for the DA. It doesn't really mean anything, but he was a part of the establishment rather than being an outsider.
It's a symbol. Like he was, he was the keeper of the law, and now he's he's fallen into this private eye, business. But him being more upstanding, the surroundings, like the area that he is in, is so much darker and grittier.
He's surrounded by corruption. That was one of Chandler's big themes. When Chandler was growing up in England, he was obsessed with Arthurian literature. Yeah. He kind of wanted to be an Arthurian scholar if his life had taken a different path, I think. He would be one of those Rhodes scholars or something. But no, it led into the pulps. But he never lost that image of the knight errant. And that's the image in Simple Art of Murder. He says the knight is a knight who is tarnished and unafraid.
Yeah.
That was his image of the perfect hero. That you live in a corrupt world, and the knight errant has to remain above the corruption of the world, but you really can't, because it's your world.
Yeah.
You can't escape it.
You are living within this world unless you alone are going to right all of the wrongs and make the world a better place. You can't really rise above your environment.
Yep. Deep down, that's what Marlowe wants to do. Marlowe is hired to do a job by the reclusive Sternwood family, who are incredibly wealthy. They're oil millionaires. Big coincidence. Yeah. The key scene is set with a bunch of old rusting oil wells.
Yep.
So he serves old man Sternwood the way a knight serves his king.
Yep.
He goes out of his way to protect the Sternwood name, the Sternwood reputation, even though there's nothing about the family that deserves protecting. They're horrible people, awful, to the last one.
Every single one is just...
But as a proper knight errant, Marlowe believes that he can rise above it all by protecting his client, and he can't.
No.
Spoiler alert.
There's even a lot of scenes where he's trying to protect one of the daughters, Carmen, who
is
just a wild child. Oh my goodness.
Carmen was such a character. They had to tone her down tremendously for every filmed version.
Yeah. Well, everything she does, it's just like, oh my goodness, honey.
Yeah.
Make better choices.
She's described in almost purely animalistic terms. Like she's somehow a feral child who's wandered into this rich person's house.
Yeah.
She has sharp teeth like a predator,
but she's also like a beautiful heiress.
And she's stunningly attractive. She spends her time sucking on her thumb, and she tried to sit in my lap when I was standing up, Marlowe says at one point. And she shows up naked at least I think 3 times in the book.
Yeah.
She just takes off her clothes.
Yeah, no, she is the I feel like she is what the archetypical, LA heiress, wild child who would have gotten in the tabloids today. She would have been like the just tabloid darling for every scandal story today if she was, someone who was alive currently.
Yeah, when I began reading the book, I'm thinking, the drugs and alcohol have just done a number on her. Yeah. But as the story progresses, you start to realize, no, it's a little more than that. She is genuinely touched by something.
Yeah, well, drugs, alcohol, if you fall into that, all right, well, maybe she's struggling through something. And then you go farther, it's like, no, there is something dark happening in her mind.
Yeah, because Marlowe was trying to keep himself pure and above corruption, but of course he's diving headfirst into the heart of darkness here, and he can't save himself ultimately. Yeah,
if he is Arthur of legend, Marlowe, then she's definitely Morgan Le Fay.
Absolutely. Definitely. Yeah. The older sister, Vivian, is an interesting character herself.
Yeah, she's a little more put together. Yeah. I mean, compared to Carmen, anyone would be a little more put together.
Yep.
She's in a loveless marriage.
She's in a loveless marriage. Her husband vanishes, and she kind of misses him, but not really.
I mean, when Marlowe goes to the house and is speaking with the father, as he's leaving, he sees Vivian, and Vivian goes, "Oh, are you here to find my husband? Are you?" So there is kind of she does have this somewhat level of caring.
Marlowe was specifically not hired to find her missing husband. Yeah. Although that's the only character anyone in the book seems to know to care about. He's constantly being asked about him, even though he wasn't hired to find him. Yeah. And as the book progresses, Marlowe, detective that he is, can't resist investigating, even though it's not in his purview.
He's like, "Oh, I got to do this off the clock. Okay." Yeah. it is an interest. I'm trying to think what to discuss in it without giving anything away, because so
yeah.
many things happen. Oh my goodness.
And things happen fast.
Yeah.
There's that chaotic, out of control element that violence has.
Yeah, no, it's like a tornado. It is a tornado of a novel. There's gals with guns. There's bookshops that are actually like secretly pornography libraries.
Yes.
They're, like the settings in this book are just incredible.
Yes. Among the many flaws the book has, Marlow is very homophobic.
Oh, incredibly homophobic.
And of course, his gay character in the book for him to feel superior to.
Yep.
Very puritanical. He is the knight errant. At one point, he flips through some of the pornography sold under the counter at this, quote, bookshop.
Yeah.
He describes the pornography the most vile and disgusting kind. I imagine it's what you can see on YouTube these days.
Yeah, oh yeah.
It's like,
It's what's on billboards today. Yeah.
It's definitely an artifact from another time.
Yeah.
But what Chandler was famous for was his descriptions. They stick in your mind. Her laughter ran around the room like mice behind the wainscoting.
Yeah, she sent me a look that would stick out my back 4 inches. Yeah.
Yeah. One of my favorites was, as the mystery is reaching its denouement, her face stopped being a face. It was just a collection of features now.
Yeah.
One reason why I was attracted to Chandler was not only do I write fiction, I also write poetry.
Yeah.
And with Chandler, it's more like a poem in the sense that a lot of his descriptions don't make actual sense, don't make intellectual sense, but you feel like they're
in
accurate.
The theme of the book, in the setting of the book, it's like, wow, that's really profound. But if someone said that to you, like walked into a room and said any of these things, be like, oh, that person's drunk and crazy. Yeah.
But in the world that Raymond Chandler created, the world that Philip Marlow goes through, that is exactly how things happen. It's one of those great stories in a lot of ways, but it's not a great mystery story. In Simple Art of Murder that I quoted from, Chandler makes fun of the stiff, dry British mysteries. He much prefers the warm-blooded, literally bloody American ones. But he also never felt like he was really writing mysteries. And true to his word, Big Sleep is a terrible mystery. Yeah,
no, it's not a great mystery. It's honestly, I would say, as far as like the course of events, especially leading up to the big like whodunit, it feels messy. It feels like it just feels very messy. It almost to the point of, like I would have not I would not have come to these conclusions, at least not in the way that you are coming to these conclusions.
Yeah, at one point when he's ground to a halt in his investigation, he literally gets a phone call from a character we haven't seen in the book before, who offers to sell him the information he needs for $200. Yeah. I mean, it makes sense in the context of the book, but as a mystery story, Poirot never needed a stranger to call up and offer him a clue,
Yeah. There's a lot in this book.
Well, he made fun of the British detectives, partly because their mysteries were intellectual puzzles, and the intellect is of no use in the world of the Big Sleep. It's a world of dreams and metaphor.
And just happening to walk into the room at the correct time when something shady is happening.
To be there. Yeah, this is a world of dreams that Marlowe is moving through, which is why the rational thought is worthless. Sherlock Holmes would have no luck here at all.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The character Marlowe, I do enjoy the character, but as you said, there is some deep flaws. Aside from the extreme alcoholism, oh my goodness, and it's just they're so blasé about the. I know it was the late 30s. It was 39 when this book came out, but oh my goodness, at the towards the end of the book, when they're wrapping everything up, Marlowe is just sitting at a bar and he's just ordering double shot of whiskey after double shot of whiskey, and this
doubles,
is just
one after the other.
This is just like his normal Tuesday. It was just absolutely nuts. There are of course, also some mildly racist undertones that are woven throughout the book. So there are definitely problems. It's not a perfect novel, but it's deeply entertaining.
In one of his other books, he describes an area of Los Angeles that's gradually more and more African Americans are moving in, and he sees this as a sign of the creeping corruption that's destroying the town. Rather than, they're finally allowing blacks to live in a slightly better part of town than they were living in a decade ago.
It's... Yeah. Reading this, you definitely have to remember it as a product of its time. I would love, even seeing adapted versions of this done, at least as a movie. But I think, like, of course, there should always be the option of the original text.
Oh, yeah. It's been filmed a couple of times, but you can't capture the rhythm and poetry of Chandler's work in a film.
Oh,
Even
yeah.
if you have the voiceover narration, it's still really difficult to catch that.
Yeah, no. I find it, instead of, if you wanted to experience it but don't have the time to sit down and read it, I'm a big advocate of audiobooks. If that's the only time you have, if that's the only thing you have time for, you don't have time to sit down and actually read a book, you need something to plug in on the car, this is a great one. It's so poetic. The rhythm of it works really well as a radio play or an audiobook.
Yeah. Well, he also at one point wrote screenplays for Hollywood. So he actually did the screenplay version of Double Indemnity, one of the classic film noirs, which he didn't write the original of, but he wrote the adaptation of it for film.
That's awesome.
Which is why calling him up to get help on your script was a really smart idea. He just wasn't able to actually help. In fact, the climax of The Big Sleep is actually very cinematic when he finally confronts the killer. And oddly enough, in the two film versions I've seen, neither one of them actually films that scene.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking back.
It doesn't happen in the Bogart version at all.
I've seen the Bogart version, and no, it doesn't. A lot gets left on the cutting room floor in the Bogart version.
There were two distinct edits of that film.
Yeah.
They recut it when Lauren Bacall became a big star, and they went back and shot new footage of her and cut out the scenes of her sister Carmen, which takes out several
Carmen's so important
parts of the movie. They made a love story between Vivian and Marlowe, which it distinctly is not in the book.
Yeah, no, it very much is not. If anything, he's trying to protect the chastity of a young lady who has no chastity left to protect. Like,
yes, I'm fighting for her virtue, which is more than she ever did, as Groucho Marx once said.
Yeah.
So it's a beautiful, well-written book, but in some ways, it's a really horribly dated book.
You have to, like any of these novels, you do have to remember it as a product of its time. It doesn't excuse the parts of it that are, those, undertones and
I have an annotated version, which actually has footnotes that explain a lot of the references he makes to things that are very casual to him that we have no knowledge of in this day and age.
Oh, absolutely. There's
here in the 21st century.
You have to have Google open on your phone while you're reading this book.
Yeah.
No, that's nice to have the updated information right there.
Really
you do.
Is.
You have to read about the book you're reading.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have some great quotes. Let me see if I can grab a couple quotes from The Big Sleep. Once again, alcoholism. You can have a hangover from other things other than alcohol. I had one from women. His wife apparently influenced a lot of the way he sees women in the novel. Like, all of the women in these novels, he based in some way, shape, or form off of his wife. Yeah,
because both of the women, the Sternwood girls, are terrible in different ways.
They are. I think it was like the darker facets of his wife. Like, she was vain. She had a lot of, she was kind of that day, like a B-grade starlet, if you would, In writing a novel, when in doubt, have two guys come through the door with guns. That's a direct Chandler quote, which I love. That's great writing. So, Ed, if you're ever stuck in your next book that you're writing, just have two guys come through the door with guns. That'll fix it.
It never fails in a Raymond Chandler book, that's for sure.
Ability is what you're capable of doing. Motivation determines what you do. Attitude determines how well you do it. Now, that's not one. That's just a direct quote from him. I just really liked that quote. I think that most of the quotes I read from him were a little bit cringy. That one was, nice. That one was, kind of uplifting, and he sounded like a man who had slept well and didn't owe too much money. That is from The Big Sleep. I just liked that one. I just enjoyed that quote. I remember reading it and I was like, oh, so nice.
He doesn't describe what the person looked like, but you know what kind of person he is from that.
Just by that, absolutely. It's that sort of poetic description, and it lets your brain kind of fill in the blanks.
Exactly.
Whenever I read, I like, you kind of play it like a movie in your head. You're seeing everything as you're reading, you're imagining. And with him, with these poetic descriptions, they were so much better and so much more detailed, other than saying he was 6 feet tall with brown eyes and stubble on his chin. That tells me nothing about the character, but he slept well, like he didn't owe too much money. It gives me so much more about that person in one line than any head-to-toe description ever would.
Absolutely. That's the thing Chandler specialized in. I want to close with a quote, too, one that I've read at poetry reading as a spoken word piece. Before I do, though, I want to reveal a in-joke or Easter egg, whatever you want to call it. And I stumbled on this myself, and I really felt dumb when I first thought of it. Okay, so Raymond Chandler created Detective Philip Marlow.
Yes.
So and he created a host of other writers that imitated him over the years. Now, the most famous Marlowe in history is Christopher Marlowe, who's the Elizabethan playwright.
Yes, I know. Him and Shakespeare hated each other.
Right. So years later in Boston, Robert Parker wants to create his own two-fisted alcoholic private eye. And so he sat down and thought about it. He came up with a character whose last name is Spencer, named after Edmund Spencer, who wrote The Fairy Queen, an Elizabethan poet. So he too wrote back the Elizabethan age to come forward with a character. So Spencer is meant to make a reference back to Marlowe, both Elizabethans.
I love it.
Yeah. This is the quote that the book takes its name from. It's one of the most famous quotes in the book. And this comes at a time when Marlowe has... It's kind of, the book starts to break down and becomes kind of a philosophical treatise. Yes, you can find a killer, but can you ever really solve a murder? You know, it's like in a deeper sense, are murders ever truly solved? This is when Marlowe starts to realize that. What did it matter where you lay once you were dead? In a dirt sump or in a marble tower on top of a high hill. You were dead. You were sleeping the big sleep. You were not bothered by things like that. Oil and water were the same as wind and air to you. You just slept the big sleep, not caring about the nastiness of how you died or where you fell. Me, I was a part of that nastiness now. Far more of a part of it than Rusty Reagan was, but the old man didn't have to be. He could lie quiet in his canopied bed with his bloodless hands folded on the sheets waiting. His heart was a brief, uncertain murmur. His thoughts are as gray as ashes. And a little while, too, he would also be sleeping the big sleep. Yeah.
Very nice. Yeah, no, that's
Raymond Chandler.
Raymond Chandler.
All right. Thank you very much. We will see you next time with another episode of Book Talking. Till then, I've been Ed.
I've been Michaela.
Till then, be safe.
Be happy, be healthy. Bye.
Bye.